Seconds here. I thank you for watching us here on The Hill. We'll be back tomorrow. Over now to Leland and All Balance.
Breaking news, 7 p.m. Eastern, the timing of this rally. You're watching Josh Shapiro on the stump in his state of Pennsylvania. The timing, 7 p.m. Eastern, is key. With that, we welcome you to the Ferris Network on television with breaking news. And it has begun. The first stop of former President Obama's 27-day swing state blitz for Democrats. He is out of retirement. This is the comeback tour. Also tonight, search and rescue teams in Florida are trying in a race against time to save lives and pluck people out of the water. Hurricane Milton leveled parts of the state's Gulf Coast. The federal government now has two massive disasters to deal with. The forgotten folks of North Carolina worry that they are going to be forgotten again. But first tonight, can Barack Obama save Kamala Harris? Democrats waited and waited and waited to replace Joe Biden. And we asked the question, do Democrats really care about beating Trump because they chose such a flawed candidate in Joe Biden? They finally answered the question by replacing Biden with another flawed candidate. That is not us saying it. That's Alex Shepard of the hardly conservative New Republic. Quote, Kamala Harris is making the same mistake she made in 2019, he writes. A close look at her failed primary campaign suggests Harris has evolved less than previously assumed. There is still time for her to change, however, but it is running out. Harris's latest interviews provide a bit of context for that article. For all of Kamala Harris's strengths, you don't get to be where she is without a lot of strengths. And she has gotten a lot better on the teleprompter. The basic give and take of politics, especially at the national level, she just cannot seem to get out of her own way. The interviews that she gives provide clip after clip for Donald Trump's attack ads. Even her media blitz this week of softball interviews had a number of major slip-ups.
Would you have done something differently than President Biden during the past 4 years?
There is not a thing that comes to mind.
What would the major changes be, and what would stay the same?
Sure. Well, I mean, I'm obviously not Joe Biden.
I noticed.
And so that would be one change in terms of... Yes. But also, I think it's important to say with, 28 days to go, I'm not Donald Trump.
And that got raucous applause from the Colbert audience. No surprise there. Not being Trump worked in 2020. It does not work when you are essentially the incumbent, and we are starting to see the ripple effects of Harris's inability to distinguish herself. Cue now the big rallies headlined by the country's most popular Democrat. This is Josh Shapiro. He's pretty popular in the state of Pennsylvania. History tells us Obama is great at campaigning for himself, not so much for others. Just ask Hillary Clinton. After all, Obama has a 57% favorability rating, and more than half of the country wishes they could vote for him again. He would win in a landslide. So here's the problem for Harris. New polling from The Hill and Emerson College shows Harris is now trailing in 4 of 7 swing states. She leads in Nevada, tied in Wisconsin and Michigan. But that is not enough if the polls were exactly this on Election Day. Donald Trump wins the presidency. And that's why we are seeing these headlines. Chris Cillizza writes, the blue wall is cracking. Mike Allen and Jim Vandehei of Axios wrote in their morning note, behind the curtain, Dems blue wall blues. To put it simply, Harris can't win the election if she cannot hold the Rust Belt. Much like the winds of a hurricane whip back around on the back side of the eye when the eye comes around, the very same winds that pushed Harris on a 45-day sugar high are now bringing the race back to the pre-Trump Biden debate numbers. And now Team Harris has 26 days to weather this storm. They're being battered from all directions. Begin tonight with George Will, NewsNation senior political contributor, Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist for The Washington Post. Mr. Will, good to see you, sir. Does Kamala Harris really want the comparison to a politician in Barack Obama who is a once-in-a-generation, once-in-a-century talent?
He's not an easy act to follow. You're quite right about that, Leland, but he's not there to change people's minds. The truly undecideds in this country today are mostly undecided not between Harris and Trump, but between whether or not to vote at all or to go out and vote. So what he's out to do right now is turnout. It's all about turnout between now and November 5th. And what they are particularly eager to have him energize the African-American vote, particularly young black men who are showing a distinct lack of enthusiasm for the election this year.
Congressman Glenn Ivey of Maryland coming up on just that single demographic, young African-American men. We saw so much enthusiasm, and you and I talked about this from the end of July when Joe Biden dropped out through the convention in Chicago. And I'm wondering how much we're now realizing that enthusiasm was not so much for Kamala Harris, but was for the idea that someone could beat Donald Trump. And now when that is being called into question, the enthusiasm for her dies out.
Well, I think that's right, because it's hard to know what you're being enthusiastic for when you're enthusiastic for Kamala Harris, who has changed so many of her views. Leland, I thought you had a hilarious clip there from the Colbert Show. She says, I'm not Joe Biden, and I'm not Donald Trump. You know, remember on airlines, sometimes when you order coffee, it comes with a little tub of white something or other. And on the top of the little tub of white something or other that's supposed to be your creamer, it says a non-dairy product, which makes you think, okay, good, it's non-dairy, but what is it? When she says, I'm not Donald Trump and I'm not Joe Biden, she's not Babe Ruth and she's not Frank Sinatra. Who is she? And I think that's the problem right now. It's a short sprint since she got in the race, but it's long enough for people to grow tired of having to guess.
You know, of all the places I thought we would go is from airlines and non-dairy creamer to Babe Ruth and Frank Sinatra. We have covered the gambit. That picture, though, of Josh Shapiro walking off the stage in Pennsylvania, one of the most popular governors in the country in a swing state that Kamala Harris is now either tied or down in the polls. The betting markets say that she will lose Pennsylvania. If she does indeed lose Pennsylvania, it is impossible not to think that the questions about the pick of Josh Shapiro, rather than not picking Josh Shapiro and picking Tim Walz instead, is going to be seen as a unbelievably critical error.
Not just a critical error, Leland, but a dishonorable error, because people are going to say, and they're going to say correctly, that she flinched from picking Shapiro because she was afraid of angering the substantial anti-Semitic component of the progressive wing of her party. That's the real disgrace here.
James Carville, and we are going to get to where Donald Trump has the ability to screw this up, but the painting of this picture is that Kamala Harris needs a win. You got to figure out some way to change the momentum, to get the big Mo back. H.W. Bush's words. Here's James Carville. Take a listen.
They need to be sharp. They need to be aggressive. They need to stop answering questions and start asking questions. They're doing all this and sitting down with 60 Minutes and sitting down with Colbert and sitting down with... No matter what, if I come on your show, you're going to ask me the questions.
That's true.
If I have a press conference, I get to ask the questions.
You'd like to see her do more press conferences?
I'd like her to put more things in place.
How does Kamala Harris get a win?
She's going to win, I think, Leland, if the Trump campaign makes the considerable mistake of not locking him in a closet between now and November 5. The more he talks, the more unhinged he seems, and the more he's apt to say something really strange. The other day, Leland, he said, in the debate with Kamala Harris, the crowd in the hall at the debate was just rapturous about how well I've done. There was no crowd.
Oh, I was there, I know.
He's doing the amazing thing, Leland, of raising the age issue, plucking it off the shoulders of the departed Joe Biden and taking it on his own shoulders.
You know, it's interesting.
We lock him away.
Yeah. We wrote in War Notes today.
Sedate him.
We wrote in War Notes today that if Donald Trump's campaign just played the View clip and the Colbert clip on repeat, especially the View clip. What would you do differently than Joe Biden? Nothing. Played it on repeat for the next 26 days, he would win. You and I have discussed this often. Never underestimate Republicans, especially Donald Trump's ability to screw things up. Apropos, him today in Detroit. Detroit being the biggest city in the biggest swing state, or second biggest swing state of Michigan. Take a listen.
The whole country is going to be like, you want to know the truth? It'll be like Detroit. Our whole country will end up being like Detroit if she's your president. You're going to have a mess on your hands.
I'm not sure which page of How to Win Friends and Influence People that idea comes from, but he could still screw this up.
The story, Leland, in October baseball is the Detroit Tigers. The city of Detroit is incandescent with excitement and pride at the moment. And by the way, Detroit itself had a nadir a few years ago, but has come back wonderfully. Down along the river, it's a vibrant, dynamic place. Remember, right before the Republicans convened in Milwaukee, he said how awful the city of Milwaukee was. Then they had to quickly put up billboards saying, well, actually, I meant it's how wonderful Milwaukee is. How many times can you step on a landmine without getting hurt?
Well, history would tell us, right, that Donald Trump can step on a landmine a lot of times. You and I have had many conversations, some in green rooms at our former employer and some now on television, of all the times you thought this is it for Donald Trump. But he keeps coming back. And it may be because of what you said, that people got excited about Kamala Harris being something different than Donald Trump, and then she stopped telling anybody what she said. This is DDHQ, Scott Tranter's model. Our model currently predicts that Kamala Harris has a 52% chance of winning the presidency, fallen 5% since August 29th. What you seem to be saying is that the only person who can reverse the momentum over the next 4 weeks is Donald Trump. It is not Barack Obama who's about to take the stage.
Barack Obama can fuel somewhat the turnout machine. Beyond that, that's all he can do. Leland, there's a reason why the Harris campaign, which knows the Harris candidacy best, is keeping her under wraps. Yeah. They've seen her on these clips that you have been showing, and it's not impressive. Therefore, they're hoping for what in tennis is called unforced errors on the part of Donald Trump. We're going to see if in 26 days he can make enough of them to elect Kamala Harris.
All right, so we've got tennis in now, baseball with Babe Ruth, Frank Sinatra show business, and airline creamers. I'll give you one more here. You make a good point that they know their candidate, and that she has to become for something. There's that old line. I had a conversation with a Democrat who said, why doesn't Kamala Harris go out and start prosecuting the case against Donald Trump, talking about Russia, giving interviews, talking about sending COVID tests to Putin, and tell the American people who exactly Donald Trump was? And I said, remember, Kamala Harris didn't make it out of Iowa. She didn't make it basically to Iowa in the 2019 campaign. That's the limitation you're talking about.
Well, that's right. And she's in a particularly difficult position because she spent the first part of her campaign, when she sprinted out of the vice presidential office, saying that Medicare for all, I don't believe that anymore. Fracking, banning fracking, I don't believe that anymore. And on and on and on. So if she now comes out and says, here's what I'm for, people will say, yeah, but your beliefs have expiration dates on them. You've just been shedding them. How do we know you won't shed this next batch of beliefs? Yeah. So in order to rehabilitate herself, she put herself in need of more rehabilitation.
Yeah, and now look, there's this fracture even within her own campaign between Tim Walz saying the Electoral College has got to go, and whether or not Kamala Harris agrees with that or not. Mr. Will, it's good to see you. We'll reconnect in Washington soon, sir.
Hope so. See you then.
Yes, sir. The political storm over hurricane response is almost as bad as the storm itself. Why politicizing the storm is fair. St. Petersburg, where people who didn't evacuate now need to get out by boat. You can see the roof of one of the major stadiums in Tampa got ripped off. Millions are without power. The death toll of Hurricane Milton now at 12. And there are fears it's only going to rise as rescuers scour the floodwaters looking for survivors. This is one of the tornadoes that was spawned by the hurricane. Men and women from sheriff's offices across the Gulf spent the day plucking survivors from the waters. This is video from our friends at the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office. You can see their water team going door to door. A frightened 14-year-old boy is very lucky to be alive right now. He spent hours alone in floodwaters clinging to a piece of fence and then was pulled out of the water. NewsNation senior national correspondent Brian Enton spent the day out with rescuers. And still, Brian, tonight, I think there's a lot of people who are cut off by the floodwaters.
Yeah, Leland, where that 14-year-old was rescued is actually just about a block from where I'm standing right now, and the water's not going down. You look behind me, this is North Tampa right here. What's been such a surprise about Milton is, one, the tornadoes that you spoke about, the tornadoes on the East Coast. No one really saw those coming. There was like 100 tornadoes. And then this flooding in this area was really a surprise. The sheriff was telling me it's never happened before. We're not near the bay. We're not near the ocean. This isn't storm surge. This is just from all of the rain that fell down. And the water's receding a little bit, but not much. It went into this entire neighborhood near the University of South Florida. And they had to go in, rescue about 200 people. There was a senior center where they had to go and get a bunch of senior citizens, which was just so sad this morning. They had to pull them all out in the wheelchairs. They had water like up to their waists. But for the most part, it seems like they've rescued everyone that needed to be rescued in this area. And then tomorrow, when the water finally hopefully drains out, you can imagine what a cleanup it's going to be, Leland.
Yeah, and you think about so many of these folks don't have flood insurance, right? And the insurance companies are all too happy to tell you, hey, if your roof blows off, we'll pay for it. But if there's water and it damages stuff, then we're done. What stories did you hear from people who were being pulled out about why they didn't leave and what they have left?
Well, this wasn't an evacuation zone out here in North Tampa. I mean, again, people came to this area to stay with friends, thinking, oh, that area never floods, which just goes to show, I mean, Florida, you know, when the tide is high and just the right amount of rainfall really anywhere can become almost like a swamp, which is what happened here. And you mentioned the flood insurance. I mean, this would be an area where people don't have flood insurance. You're only required to get it if you live in a flood zone. This isn't a flood zone. And I mean, look at this. This isn't technically a flood zone. But look at it now. It's the most flooded part of the entire city, Leland.
Wow. Brian, I'm not sure the last time you and your crew slept, but great work out there, especially today out on the airboats, bringing us the story. We'll talk soon, my friend.
Thanks, Leland.
Yeah, thank you. From Milton to Hurricane Helene, western North Carolina, folks there are still homeless. They have not gotten help. This video is just from a couple of days ago. Power outages in America now go from the Tennessee border all the way down to Key West, just before the election. So think about that on so many levels. With us now, Kadia Goba, Semaphore congressional political reporter, Dan Ronayne, senior vice president at Touchdown Strategies, former advisor for the U.S. Republican Conference. Nice to see both of you. Kadia, start with you. How worried are Democrats, whether or not it is fair or not, that the optics after Hurricane Helene are going to be painful, hurtful, insert whatever adjective you want?
I think both parties are struggling with this. This is going to be a Herculean task for Board of Election officials who have to kind of clear things up, find missing ballots, explain away damaged ballots, and try to, really pull things together. There's been some recovery efforts now where we see new rules about, extended deadlines, not specifically in North Carolina. They are up for their early voting, or their registration deadline is up tomorrow. But there's rules that say like you can bring in an outstanding ballot up until the day before Election Day, or absentee ballot. And then, things are they're trying to extend it for voters. But this is going to be hard on both parties, but primarily because of, right in the center there's Asheville, which is a Democratic stronghold. Yep. But all of those surrounding counties are very red.
Yeah, we're going to go county by county in North Carolina coming up here. Bigger picture, Dan. I think about how Donald Trump is dealing with this from the Republican standpoint. Here he is talking about federal government hurricane relief.
The federal government, on the other hand, has not done what you're supposed to be doing. In particular, with respect to North Carolina, they've let those people suffer unjustly. And we're praying for all of those who lost a house or, much more importantly, a precious loved one.
There's two sides to this for Republicans. There's legitimate criticism of the fumbles after Helene in North Carolina and how long it took to call out the folks from Fort Bragg, the search and rescue teams from active duty U.S. military. There is the discussion about the fact, just in terms of numbers, that there's 14,000 hotel rooms being rented in New York City at $350 a night for illegal immigrants. And folks in North Carolina are living in tents or with families and may not be able to pay for rent or have a Thanksgiving dinner. Those criticisms. And then there's the nuts conspiracy theories that Republicans seem to have glommed onto as it relates to Hurricane Helene. I think the conspiracy theories may be more of a danger for Republicans than the rightful criticisms are a help for them.
Well, I think people in North Carolina are desperate for help. They don't want to be political footballs. What they need is empathy. And what they're looking for is competence. And they've seen a lot of that out of Governor DeSantis in Florida. I think maybe one of the best things that Trump could do out of this is say Ron DeSantis will agree to be his Department of Homeland Security head, so he gets to run FEMA, ICE, and Secret Service. So all those could use a little bit of leadership. Interesting thought.
Kadia, I'm going to play for you today President Biden on price gouging. Here he was in one of his many press conferences over the past 72 hours.
To anyone who seeks to take advantage of our fellow Americans' desperation, whether you're a company engaging in price gouging or a citizen trying to scam your neighbors, we will go after you and we will hold you accountable.
Is that really what hurricane victims are worried about right now? I've covered an awful lot of hurricanes, and that's not the problems I've seen.
No, I think you're right. Obviously, that's going to be an issue, right? If the price gouging is that dramatic, that's always going to be an issue. But right now, people want recovery when it comes to their homes. They're looking at, new articles that say the Small Business Administration is, running out of money. So I think people are wanting to get back in their homes, obviously, and they're very concerned about how the government expedites just repairing everything around them. Right. We've heard that there's, on the ground, there are not enough forces apparently coming from FEMA. But, look,
at some point, the commander-in-chief has to take responsibility. He may not get responsibility, but ends up with the blame. Dan, the lady got the first word and the last word. We'll give you more time next time. Thank you both. We appreciate it. Good to see you. Black voters, overwhelmingly support Kamala Harris over Donald Trump. New polling shows they're just not that enthusiastic about her run. We'll put up live pictures. Barack Obama on the stage soon. Can Barack Obama, after he takes over from Bob Casey, fix the problem? All right, live pictures. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. That is Bob Casey, who is in a very tight Senate race, much tighter than Democrats would like to hold on to his seat in the United States Senate. He speaks, and then Barack Obama takes the stage. Kamala Harris has called out the cavalry, bringing in the most popular Democrat in America to give her, perhaps stalled campaign a boost. There is Barack Obama as he walks out, bringing Congressman Glenn Ivey very briefly. Barack Obama got 95% of the black vote. Kamala Harris is at 79%. What does Barack Obama have to say right now, Congressman?
I think Barack Obama needs to be Barack Obama. I think he needs to talk along the same lines he did at the convention. But I think the key thing is that he gets out, gets to the key communities where turnout's going to be critical, and people are starting to focus very closely. And I think he can help get the job done.
All right, if you can, stick around with us. We'd love to have your comments on the other side of the former president. Here we go.
Are you ready to go? It is good. It is good to be back in Pennsylvania. It is good to be back in Pittsburgh. I love Pittsburgh. You know, I love the people of Pittsburgh. I love the food in Pittsburgh. I don't usually do this, but this is a little bit of a Yelp rating. Just had some of Pamela's pancakes. I first had those like 10, 15 years ago when I was running. And I was all like, I need some of those pancakes this time out. And even though I'm from Chicago, some of you may know, when I was a kid, I was a Steelers fan. And watching the Steelers this season, it seems I'm not the only guy from Chicago who likes being in Pittsburgh. Because so far, Justin Fields is doing pretty good. Now, before we get started, we have a little bit of work to do here. All right, so I want everybody to be, just settle in. We got some work to do. Before we get started, I did want to say that we are, heartbroken about the loss of life in Florida, North Carolina, states across the Southwest. We are thinking about people, families whose lives have been upended by the storms over the last couple of weeks. I could not be more grateful for the first responders and FEMA professionals who have put themselves in harm's way to try and help. It's times like this when you realize having honest, competent leadership in government really matters. It makes a difference. And today I'm asking you to vote for some of those leaders, including some folks we need working with your outstanding governor, who you just heard from, Governor Josh Shapiro. We need them in Harrisburg. So we need you to vote for your next Auditor General, Malcolm Kenyatta. Your next Attorney General, Eugene DePasquale. Your next State Treasurer, Eric McClellan. And my buddy, your outstanding United States Senator Bob Casey. Now, here in Pennsylvania, there are 3 ways to vote. You can vote early, in person, at the county election office, or at a satellite office. You can also vote by mail. And if you need to figure out how to do that, just go to iwillvote.com PA to find a place to vote early or to request a ballot. And, of course, you can vote at your polling place on Election Day, November 5th. But if you're at this rally, let's face it, you're probably voting unless you are 12. So you also have to help your friends and family make a plan to vote. And even if you're 12, you can do that. Talk to your mom and dad and aunts and uncles, because together we have a chance to choose a new generation of leadership in this country and start building a better and stronger and fairer and more hopeful America. Now, you've already heard tonight, this election's going to be tight. Because there are a lot of Americans who are still struggling out there. They're still striving to make life better for themselves, for their families, and for their kids. And let's face it, as a country, we've been through a lot these last few years. We had a historic pandemic wreaking havoc on communities and businesses. Disruptions from the pandemic then caused prices to spike, and that put a strain on family budgets. And in many ways, it's felt like the aspirations of working people have taken a back seat to the priorities of the rich and the powerful. So I get it, why people are looking to shake things up. I mean, I am the hopey-changey guy. So I understand people feeling frustrated and feeling we can do better. What I cannot understand is why anybody would think that Donald Trump will shake things up in a way that is good for you, Pennsylvania. I don't understand that. Because there is absolutely no evidence that this man thinks about anybody but himself. I've said it before. Donald Trump is a 78-year-old billionaire who has not stopped whining about his problems since he rode down his golden escalator 9 years ago. You've got the tweets in all caps, the ranting and the raving about crazy conspiracy theory. You have the 2-hour speeches, word salad, just, it's like Fidel Castro, just on and on. Constant attempts to sell you stuff. Who does that? Selling you gold sneakers and a $100,000 watch and most recently a Trump Bible. He wants you to buy the Word of God, Donald Trump edition. Got his name right there next to Matthew and Luke. I mean, you could not make this stuff up. If you saw it on Saturday Night Live, you'd say, well, no, that's going too far. No, he's doing that. It's crazy. And the reason he does it is because all he cares about is his ego and his money and his status. He's not thinking about you. Donald Trump sees power as nothing more than a means to an end. He wants the middle class to pay the price for another huge tax cut that would mostly help him and his country club buddies. Doesn't care if he costs more women their reproductive freedoms because it won't make a difference in his life. Do not boo. Vote. They can't hear your boos, but they can hear your votes. Most of all, Donald Trump wants us to think that this country is hopelessly divided between us and them, between the quote-unquote real Americans who support him and the outsiders who don't. Because having people divided and angry, he figures boosts his chances of being elected. And he doesn't care who gets hurt. Think about it. Just the other day, we learned that on January 6th, a couple years ago, Donald Trump was told that Mike Pence was in the Capitol about 40 feet from an angry mob chanting, "Hang Mike Pence." And his response was, quote, "So what? Don't boo." If Donald Trump does not care that a mob might attack his own vice president, do you think he cares about you? Pennsylvania, we do not need 4 more years of that. We don't need 4 more years of arrogance and bumbling and bluster and division. America's ready to turn the page. We are ready for a better story, one that helps us work together instead of turning against each other. Pennsylvania, we're ready for President Kamala Harris. And the good news is Kamala Harris is ready to do the job. This is a leader who has spent her life fighting on behalf of people who need a voice and a champion. Somebody who was raised in the middle class, who worked a summer job at McDonald's while she earned a degree, who believes in the values that built this country. Somebody who has served with distinction in every office that she has ever held. I think we probably had a fainting spell back there. So let's make space for the emergency folks. This happens sometimes. Everybody bend their knees a little bit. You've been standing for a while. You can dance if you want. I just suggest to bend your knees. But she'll be okay. Kamala is as prepared for the job as any nominee for president has ever been. That's who Kamala is. And in the White House, she will have an outstanding partner in Governor Tim Walz. Tim is a veteran. He is a teacher. He's a coach. He's a hunter. He's been a great governor working with Democrats and Republicans to get stuff done. He can also take a vintage truck apart and put it back together again. You think Donald Trump can do that? For that matter, do you think Donald Trump has ever changed a tire in his life? I'm just trying to picture it. The point is, if you elect Kamala and Tim, they won't be focused on their problems, they'll be focused on yours. They understand that too many folks here in Pennsylvania and across the country are struggling to pay the bills. Even though wages are steadily growing and inflation is finally slowing, the price of everything from health care to housing to groceries, it's still too high. And that takes a real bite out of paychecks. It hurts. So the question is, who's really going to do something about it? That's what you should be asking yourself. Now, Donald Trump's plan is to do what he did last time, which was give another massive tax cut to billionaires and big corporations. And then, don't boo, I'm going to break you of this habit. And the reason some people think, well, I don't know, I remember that economy when he first came in being pretty good. Yeah, it was pretty good, because it was my economy. We had had 75 straight months of job growth that I handed over to him. It wasn't something he did. I had spent 8 years cleaning up the mess that the Republicans had left me the last time. So just in case everybody has a hazy memory, he didn't do nothing except those big tax cuts. His other big economic plan now is to slap tariffs on everything, from food to TVs. Now, understand what tariffs are. Anything that's coming from that's made elsewhere and comes here, you slap extra money on top of it. And if other countries are cheating, in some cases, it makes sense because you want to have a fair playing field. But what he's proposing is basically a Trump sales tax that could cost the average family almost $4,000 a year. So if you're concerned about higher prices, that is not the way to get lower prices. That's going to come out of your pocket. You think prices are high now? Donald Trump's message basically is, you ain't seen nothing yet. All right, so that's as far as you can tell, that's his plan, right? Because it's not written down anywhere. When it comes to health care, you heard it in the debate. Donald Trump's got one answer. Ending the Affordable Care Act that 45 million people rely on. The other day, his running mate, J.D. Vance, had you gotta vote. The other day, his running mate had the nerve to say, Donald Trump salvaged the Affordable Care Act. I mean, Donald Trump spent his entire presidency trying to tear it down. And by the way, he couldn't even do that right. And now, 8 years after he was elected, when he was asked about what he was going to do, he says he's got concepts of a plan for how he'd replace it. Now, I want you all to think about this for a second. Let's say your boss gives you an assignment, a project. He says, I need this on Friday. And Friday comes around and he says, so, did you finish that project I asked for? And he says, well, I actually haven't started, but I have a concept of a plan. Or you could try it at home. Honey, did you do the dishes? I have a concept of a plan to do the dishes. How's that going to go over? If it wouldn't work for you, why in the heck should it work for the President of the United States? But the good news is, Kamala Harris, she doesn't have concepts for a plan. She has an actual plan to make your life better. To bring down the cost of things like groceries. She'll go after corporations that are jacking up prices. Just like she went after big banks and for-profit colleges when she was an attorney general in California. And believe me, when she does, nobody's going to want to stand in her way. I remember after the home mortgage crisis, Kamala pushed me and my administration harder than any other attorney general in the country to make sure homeowners got a fair settlement. It did not matter that she was pushing a Democratic administration. She was not going to let anybody stop her from winning as much relief as possible for the families who deserved it. And because of the work she did, those families got billions more than they would have otherwise got. That's the kind of president Kamala Harris will be. To lower housing costs, Kamala will cut red tape and work with governors like Josh Shapiro, as well as the private sector, to build 3 million new homes. And she'll give first-time home buyers up to $25,000 to help with the down payment. Plans, concrete plans. And for a lot of folks, that could be the difference between watching their dreams pass them by or finally owning a place of their own. To lower health care costs, Kamala already worked with Joe Biden to take on the drug companies and bring down the cost of insulin and hearing aids and more than 50 prescription drugs. And as president, she will never stop working to limit out-of-pocket costs and protect your care. That's who Kamala is. She's got a track record of doing it. And here's a big one. Instead of giving more tax breaks to billionaires and raising prices on working families, Kamala will give a tax cut to 100 million middle class and working people here in America. So, if you're a new parent, you could qualify for a $6,000 tax credit during the first year of your child's life. Because I don't have to tell a lot of you, raising kids is hard. And she wants to make it easier to afford stuff like a crib or a car seat or diapers. I remember buying diapers. I remember the first time I went in the store, right after Malia was born. I was like, what? That's how much diapers cost? I remember changing diapers. You think Donald Trump ever changed a diaper?
No chance.
Yeah. I almost said that, but I decided I shouldn't say it. If you're starting a small business, Kamala Harris will give you a $50,000 tax credit to help you get it off the ground. That's who Kamala Harris is. That's what she stands for. So with Kamala, you've got actual plans. Trump, concepts of a plan. Now, if you challenge Trump to elaborate and enumerate his concepts, he will fall back on one answer. J.D. Vance does the same thing. Doesn't matter what the issue is, housing, health care, education, paying the bills. Their only answer is to blame immigrants. They want you to believe that if you let Donald Trump round up whoever he wants, by the way, and ship them out, all your problems will be solved. Now, we've got real issues at the border. We are a nation of laws and a nation of immigrants. We have to make sure it's fair. There are communities at the border that can be overrun. We've got to actually solve a problem. But when I hear Donald Trump talking, I've got one question. As I recall, Donald Trump was president for 4 years. And if rounding up and deporting millions of desperate people and building the beautiful wall, and didn't matter whether some of those folks you rounded up were women and children, if that's the answer to everything, well, why didn't you solve the problem? Why were the number of immigrants basically the same when you left office as when you took office? I'll tell you why. Because he didn't have a real plan. He had talking points. He had concepts of a plan. And the plan was mean and ugly. And it was designed to enhance his politics and make people angry, not to solve the problem. You know what would actually help bring order to the border and fix our immigration system? The bipartisan deal that Kamala Harris supported, even though it was written by one of the most conservative Republicans in Congress, the same bill that Donald Trump tanked on purpose because he thinks fear-mongering is how he's going to win this election. He told Republicans, even the ones who had originally supported, don't vote for it, because he doesn't want the problem solved. We don't need a president who will make problems worse just to make his own political circumstances better. We need a president who actually cares about solving problems and making your life better, and that's what Kamala Harris will do. And to help her do it, she will need a Senate full of serious public servants like Bob Casey. I'm going to talk about this man just for a second. I've known Bob for almost 20 years. I've watched his daughters grow up. I know his brothers and cousins, and let me tell you, there are a lot of brothers and cousins.
All right, we're now at the point of the speech where Barack Obama is talking about what is really terrifying Democrats right now, which is that they may lose some very winnable Senate seats. He's talking about Bob Casey, who's running for Senate in Pennsylvania. Democrats in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan may have a very difficult time if the polling holds true. There is an irony, of course, to Barack Obama heading out on the campaign trail for Kamala Harris. It is Barack Obama's time in office that gave us Donald Trump. And there are no two men in politics, politics is personal, that get under each other's skin the same way that Donald Trump and Barack Obama go after each other. Donald Trump made his political chops going after Barack Obama, and Barack Obama then returned the favor. We saw that tonight, a little bit of the ridicule of Donald Trump, and we also saw a orator of a type that Kamala Harris would not like to be compared to. This is the next 26 days. Barack Obama in the swing states. Here's Chris.
All right, Chris Cuomo here. Thank you for joining NewsNation's continuing coverage of Hurricane Milton. Now, the big surprise with this storm was what happened before the hurricane actually hit, okay? These outer bands caused tornadoes that they're still trying to figure out the count of. Absolutely